We had a lot of people coming, still waiting for the other people to come. So please be patient with us. We're also advertising on social media as well, Instagram and on Facebook, and you can also grab a link there in regards to attending. And one of our panelists will actually write the ID and the password in the chat so you can share with anybody blues. Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge the peoples of the Mississauga-Scugog Island. I'm located right now in Ajax, but you may all be located in different parts of the province, the country, or even internationally. So wherever you are, I encourage you to remember and think of the people who inhabited those lands or the natives of those lands. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. These lands we are situated on are covered under the Williams Treaty and the traditional territory of the Mississauga, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people, and we acknowledge this land out of respect for the Indigenous nations who have cared for Turtle Island, also called North America, from before the arrival of the settler peoples until this day. Most importantly, we remember the history of these lands has been tainted by poor treatment, a lack of friendship with the First Nations who call them home. This history is something we are all affected by, as we are all treaty people. We have a shared history to reflect on, and each of us is affected by this history in many different ways. Our past defines our present, but if we move forward as friends and allies, it does not have to define our future. The Kajenga Wellness Project is proudly funded by the Ontario Chilean Foundation, which has permitted us to be able to provide a wealth of workshops and activities for you. We also have access to support groups, counseling, and other resources that may be helpful towards you and your family. And we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the experiences of Black people within Canada and North America. Anti-Black racism was coined by Akua Benjamin, who wrote, "Anti-Black racism is defined as policies and practices rooted in Canadian history. Institutions such as education, healthcare, and justice that mirror and reinforce beliefs and attitudes, prejudices, stereotyping, and discrimination towards people of African descent." We'd like to acknowledge that Canada's people have been forced into slavery and built North America with no compensation. We know that since that time, Canada has repeatedly denied the rights of African Canadian people for many generations. And today we'll talk a little bit about how those experiences can also impact families intergenerationally. We acknowledge that our ancestors who fought for freedom, for equal rights and pay, the right to vote, to partake in society, and we acknowledge their rights and their wishes for us to live safe in our homes and within our community. And our commitment to our community is to ensure that we acknowledge, yes, the past, we acknowledge what's happening today, but we also provide resources and support to move forward in the future. So we're here for you. And so let's start our discussion. Why are we here? So it's been a difficult road. I think almost about a year ago, we started to hear a lot about the experiences of people across the world with COVID-19. And many of us thought, oh, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen. It's not going to change our lives in North America. I remember listening to a program and one of the individuals like, why are we even talking about this? This is happening in China. It's not happening here. And lo and behold, within weeks, COVID-19 spread within our country and within North America. In addition to that, we've had the heightened experiences of those who have been exposed inequitably towards COVID-19, as well as anti-Black racism was highlighted, and anti-Indigenous racism was quite highlighted in Canada here as well. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult to witness these events. It's been difficult that we haven't been able to socialize and connect with our family members as we used to. Many of us have lost people in their lives quite tragically and quite quickly, and we haven't really had the opportunity to heal or move forward because we're still in it. Many places across this province are still in a stay-at-home order, even today. So remember, I remember hearing a quote that we only live once, and it's better to live our lives to the fullest. Trying just to be able to get by isn't living. You know, being able to live to our truest potential is really important. And it's hard to do that when, you know, we're inundated by so many messages within our day-to-day life. You're here for many reasons, and I'm hoping that through this discussion today that you'll be able to receive what information is beneficial for you. So as I shared before, bring your tea, bring your notebook, and let's learn together. In addition, if you have any questions, feel free to use our question and answer or a chat box. And we have designated times that we hope to answer your questions as well. You know, if anything pops in your head, feel free to just put it in the chat, as well as at the end, we'll also leave some time for discussion. So very, very full agenda, lots of information that we wanted to share with you. We wanted to start off by talking about what is resiliency mental health? What does that mean? How can we develop and maintain wellness within our everyday life? We also wanted to talk about the impact of seasonal affective disorder. So if you've not heard of that disorder, we will hopefully be able to touch on that today. We'll talk a little bit about race trauma and how we can then move towards healing within our lives. And then we'll end off in ways on how you can support your children. And again, any recommendation or final thoughts. I'm also joined here by my two co-facilitators, Sophia Ahmad and Taylor Brown, who are also here. I'm not sure if I see their faces. There you are. So thank you for having us today. And I skipped a slide. So what does it mean to have resiliency in mental health? And what I usually say and understand it is around being able to plan, being able to know what feels good for you, what you want for yourself, and being able to plan for those days and times when you can't just live the way that you want to, or you start to struggle in many different ways of your life. And so that's what I mean by building resilience. And it's possible to do that. You know, whether you may be diagnosed with something called anxiety or depression, or bipolar disorder, or any other disorders that may come up that you may be diagnosed with, it doesn't mean that you can't be mentally well. Sometimes our symptoms and our experiences of wellness change over time. And sometimes there's going to be times in our life, maybe now, where we're not feeling well, we're not feeling, you know, the best way that we can be or up to ourselves. And that's fine. That's part of life. And then there's going to be times when we're going to feel really well, when you're going to feel healthy and at your best. And that's how you can kind of build resiliency, is when you are feeling at your best, being able to engage in activities that helps build your soul, your mind, your body, and all of that. It takes one step towards resiliency and mental health. And that is accepting that our symptoms can come and go throughout our life, and accepting that getting support or creating a plan is what's going to help us take us to the next step. Whenever you notice or become aware that difficulties may arise within your life, or you're feeling more emotional or more upset than usual, or even just anxious because of the things that have been happening within our world and our day-to-day life, ask for support. Seek support. If you notice that there's a friend or family member who doesn't seem quite themselves or seems to be struggling, be that helping hand. reach out to them. Seeking support is really the determining factor in terms of our resiliency, is connected to our ability to connect with others and to grow with other people as well. And start with being mindful. So I created this slide with a thought, hopefully, for you to think about something in terms of mindfulness. Many people feel, mindfulness is just meditation, and I can't meditate. Meditating is so difficult. But mindfulness, to me, I don't find it as meditation. I think of it more as being present and being aware of ourselves. And sometimes it's hard to do. Pre-COVID, I remember rushing from one place to the other place and, always having this mindset, go, go, go. And my mind is going around all the time. And very rarely do I check in on myself to see if I've eaten today, how am I feeling, am I tired, what's happening? And that's pretty much symbolic of many of our lives. And so mindfulness is just being present and being aware with what's happening in the present moment. It's when you put away your phone and you focus on playing with your children, or you take a shower and you just focus on taking a shower and not all the other things that you need to do with your life. And by doing mindfulness, 5-10 minutes per day, just being present and being aware, it actually reduces stress and anxiety. The next one is being able to create balance. And here is what I wanted to do an activity with all of you today. So I'm going to prompt you with some questions. Feel free to use the chat to share, because we're here to share with each other. Or you may also kind of just do it on your own. But being able to create balance in all these areas of your life will help to infuse wellness within your everyday life. And I kind of borrowed this cycle. We'll talk about another wellness cycle as well, but I borrowed this cycle from Indigenous holistic beliefs in terms of the 4 directions. And so I broke it out into 5 and like to take some time to go with each of one with you to kind of explain what they mean. The idea is, if you have balance within all of these areas in your life, it can kind of support you when you have difficulties or when difficult things happen within your life. The first one is relationships. So I chose this one because our connection, our ability to connect with others is very much what makes us humans. It makes us the ability to develop social attachments and connections. So before you rush to start thinking of all the people, I'd like you to think first about who are the closest people in your circle. Who are the closest people that may be to you, that you go to them whenever you need support? And then who are your friends? Who are the people that you just go to for a good laugh, who can help you feel good about yourself, who can just take your mind off of your everyday life? Who are those people? And feel free to write them down. And who are your mentors? Who are the people that you may go to for advice, for career support, and any kind of professional support? And who are your colleagues? Now with the COVID, many of us are working at home, and we don't have the same interactions that we used to with our colleagues, going out for lunch or in the coffee room. Like, all of that has changed drastically. But there's still a level of connection that you can still do through chatting, to messaging, to just even talking to your colleagues throughout the day. So who are those people? Who are those people who you can talk to about? And then who are the other people who you may not call on all the time, but they're there for you? They got your back. Those are the people that are formal, who may be counselors or, guidance, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, doctors, and they may also be informal people like an auntie or an uncle or cousin. Hopefully when you're writing down your list of people that you're having some joy and some memories are coming back to you, but they're reminding you that the importance of having people in your life, and those people in your life can really support you when things are difficult. And they don't have to be the people that you tell all your, sorrows and your sadness to. They're also people that you can just talk to, just for fun, or just, paying attention to what's going on in their life. The next part is the physical. And, of course, many people, when they, talk about physical stuff, they may think of walking or running or physical exercise. But I'd like to kind of focus on something greater than that. And if we think of our bodies as our temple, the place that we have been able to borrow. Someone said that to me the other day, that we're living in bodies that we're borrowing, and so it's our responsibility to take care of them. They're also hold our pain, our emotions. When difficult things have happened to us, from car accidents to physical abuse or any other traumas, all of that's held within our body. Our experiences, our memories, all of those things are held within our body. So knowing how much our bodies hold and what our bodies can do, what do you do to heal your body? What are the activities that you do, maybe superficial, like getting your nails done or massages, or even things such as dance or music? What are the activities that you do to heal your body and to help your body heal whenever there's difficult experiences? And feel free to write them down. And maybe there are things that you don't practice every day, but you'd like to incorporate into your day-to-day life because you feel like you can do that. And you feel by doing so that it can be part of your wellness routine. And the next one is our mentality. I kept our logo here because Kajunga, really wants to enrich your minds. And we try to do so with workshops, with webinars, providing information with support groups, because we believe in the power of knowledge. And with knowledge, we're able to have choices. We're able to look at things objectively and make the right decision for ourselves and for our families. When it comes to our mentality, many of us may use our minds in terms of working every day. And use it in that way, or even with our children and helping them with their homework. But I'm also talking about our mentality. So, how we perceive things that happen within our world, how we perceive ourselves, and the types of thoughts that we have going through our minds. By enhancing our thoughts, so, creating opportunities for us to grow mentally, creating opportunities to develop our knowledge, we enrich our minds and we give ourselves, the ability to make really clear decisions, especially when difficult things are that we experience. And the other part lies within this picture. When you see this picture, what do you think of? What do you think her state of mind is? And I'd like you to think about your own mental state. How we think about ourselves and how we think about other people, it's reflected in our behavior. It's reflected in our attitudes and our feelings. And so being able to notice when we have thoughts that are not helpful or thoughts that may bring us down, that we're able to actively work on changing some of those thoughts or adjusting them, or even just looking at, why do I think the way that I do? Our disposition, or how we feel within our mind, can really help us be able to start new goals or achieve new things that we need to do, or even help us to build healthier relationships by just adjusting how we think about certain things. And this is hard. This is hard work to do that. Because as I said, as our body holds a lot of pain, it also holds some of those messages from those pain. And so seeking support to kind of help adjust your mind is one of my strongest recommendations. The next one that I wanted to talk to you about was spirituality. So when I was growing up, spirituality was going to church every single Sunday, reading our Bibles and being part of that Christian faith. But spirituality sometimes is more than just faith or religion. It's about almost our purpose. Why are we here? What meaning do we bring to our experiences that we have, and how do we make the best of it? When a time as this, when many people have lost their lives to COVID, when there's lots of uncertainty in terms of our health, lots of fears around the vaccination, for example, understanding and knowing our purpose will help bring us through and help ground us to Stay steady when things get difficult, when our anxieties go up because of the real challenges that we're facing today. So I'd like you to take some time to think about, what is your purpose? What are things that you can do for others or even yourself that can bring you joy? And what meaning do you place into events that occur, even difficult events? And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. And the last one I wanted to share with you was emotional regulation. So our world has taught us sometimes that feelings are either bad or good. And I'd like to expand your thoughts to say no feelings are bad. Some are difficult, that are hard for us to manage, that's hard for us to cope with, like grief or loss or even anger. But it doesn't mean that they're bad. We need those emotions to be able to heal. We are also often taught that we're supposed to push aside our emotions, put them in a box carefully, or just ignore that we're feeling how we're feeling. And that doesn't help our feelings. Our feelings need to find a way to be released within our bodies, within our mouths, being able to talk about it, to be able to let go. And so my question for all of you today is, what do you do with your difficult feelings? What do you do with your difficult feelings? Hopefully I can play this video.
Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a social worker and the program and outreach coordinator at Sheena's Place. And I want to talk briefly about one way to cope with difficult emotions, and that this can be used during COVID-19 or really during any time. So everyone experiences negative or difficult emotions, whether that's sadness, anger, shame, all of the above, at some point in their lives. And most people, understandably, do not like experiencing these emotions. Our instinct is often to hide or avoid these emotions through distraction or escape strategies, and this makes sense because these emotions can be so unpleasant and distressing. And although avoidance and distraction can be really helpful in getting us through situations in the short term, and it may be the safest option in a given situation, in the long term, avoiding negative emotions rarely benefits us. So, acceptance and commitment therapy is a type of therapy that uses a lot of metaphors to help people cope with difficult emotions and thoughts. One metaphor that I really like is the beach ball metaphor. So, this is something that I use in a lot of the groups that I run, and it's something that you can use when you're feeling sad, angry, lonely, or any of the above. It's not meant for times of intense distress, but for when your emotional temperature has cooled a bit, but those feelings are still with you. So I'll invite you to imagine yourself standing in a body of water, like a lake, an ocean, or a pool, and to imagine that you're holding an inflatable beach ball. So the beach ball represents your emotions, and avoiding or suppressing these emotions is like trying to hold the beach ball underwater. No matter how hard you push the ball, your arms will get tired or you'll need to change positions. And eventually, the beach ball will pop out of the water, meaning your emotions will pop back up, maybe more strongly, and become totally overwhelming or create a metaphorical splash or hit you in the face. Pushing the ball underwater also uses quite a bit of effort. So if you're pushing the ball underwater, you can't use your hands for much else. This means that suppressing or avoiding our emotions can take up quite a bit of effort and can take away from other aspects of our lives. So instead of pushing the ball underwater, imagine letting it float beside you. It's still there and it may still be distressing, but you won't always notice it. And maybe it will slowly float away. This doesn't mean that we should never react to our difficult emotions, and I'm not suggesting that we should just accept whatever comes at us without responding. However, sitting with our emotions can take some of their power away, and it can allow us to respond intentionally and slowly instead of react impulsively. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kate.
I hope that was helpful in terms of helping understand the importance of being able to let go of emotions, and also using strategies to help us to be able to manage our emotions in a healthy way. Well, hopefully by now you've thought of or considered um, 5 different ways that you can be able to create balance within your everyday life. Don't you love this photo? Very beautiful. In terms of taking care of yourself, create an action plan for yourself. So knowing that you're feeling great, today is Friday. Well, tomorrow will be Friday, but tomorrow will be Friday. You get up, you're feeling great, and you just maximize the greatness of those days. And then Monday comes around and you're just feeling not the greatest and not at your best self. So figure out how you're going to manage those days. And to be honest, many people tell me that, when I have bad days, I just don't want to get out of bed and I just want to, take the day easy and just don't want too much stress. And I agree with you. I think on those days when you're not feeling well, create a plan to take care of yourself and show compassion to yourself, because we all have days when we're at our top and other days when we don't feel the greatest. And on the days that we don't feel the greatest, we know that we need to do more self-care and more attention to our bodies, our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, so that we can get through those days successfully. A little different is developing a self-care routine. So adding in things in your life that can help you feel good, whether it's going for walks, whether it's making sure that your home is nice and clean or decorated. I love to like change around furniture in my house. That's a very good cleansing way for me to kind of reorganize my thoughts. Anything that you can do to kind of put into your self-care routine that you do every day that's consistent is really important. So especially with the mornings and the nighttime, it's really important to develop routines around those days. So thinking about your nighttime, what is a routine that you can start to develop that can kind of prepare you for restful sleep and help you to kind of package the day so you're not holding on to thoughts or feelings from earlier on that day. And reduce the stigma. I share this because many of us still hold stigma about mental health. I mean, we were growing up in areas where mental health wasn't talked about, feelings weren't talked about. Every time we had something difficult happen to us, we were told that we need to move on and pass through that issue. And now things are different. Now we're beginning to really talk about mental health. So address the stigma that you may feel and reduce the stigma. Reach out for support and do the same for a friend who may also be in need as well. Any questions? Someone asked if our webinar will be emailed to us at a later date, and absolutely. I'm glad you like the early jazz music. That was a suggestion from one of my students, and it's been working really well. So anyone else have any questions? And thanks for the comment. And thank you everyone for joining. I understand we had someone here from the Philippines. So thank you so much for joining us. That was actually my daughter's trip the day before COVID hit in Ontario. She was getting ready to go to the Philippines and got a call that the plane was canceled. So yeah. All right. And feel free to ask any questions that may come up as well. Oh, excellent question. So what are some ways we can avoid being hard on ourselves when we aren't able to follow our routines? We practice being hard on ourselves from the time we were as young as 4 years old. We've always been hard on ourselves. We've always the first thing to say, why did I do that? Or I'm such a failure. Like I've heard those thoughts from little kids. So we also have to do the same when it comes to being compassionate and kind to ourselves. So just start. So whenever you make a mistake or whenever you need those days for self-care, or whenever you notice that you're being hard on yourself, take the time to tell yourself, it's okay. It's okay, Nicole. You got this. You're going to be good. You have to be your number one hero. And if you're continuing to do this all the time, eventually it becomes a part of your day-to-day life. As much as those difficult thoughts came when you were a kid, when you're hard on yourself, the same compassionate thoughts will start to blend into your everyday life. And you'll just do it automatically. You won't even consider it anymore. It will just happen. The other question is, what kind of routines do you do? I don't know if my co-facilitators want to answer that as well, but my routine in the mornings are, get up early. I may work out or not, depending on how I feel. Having a cup of coffee. I bought this huge espresso machine for myself that I thought would be hard to use, but apparently it's really easy, so you should get it. Having a cup of coffee and just sitting, relaxing for a little bit, thinking about all the things I need to do for my day. And then I read my emails and then I start working. So that's my routine. But Taylor, Sophia, did you want to share what your routines are?
One thing that I do that I find really grounding and helpful is I write 5 things that I'm grateful for every night before I go to bed. And it kind of makes me think, and like one of them has to be about the day that I had. So it makes me think and go back in my day and think about the things that were good that happened to me. And then after a while of doing it, I noticed that I was looking during the day and I was like, oh, I'm grateful for that. Like I can write that down tonight. And so it is really true that when you start doing something, the repetition really kind of gets into your brain and then it becomes more natural as you go on.
Absolutely. Great idea. Great suggestion.
And for myself, I try to start my day with the pray. I try to pray early in the morning, and then get to any of my work or routine. So I feel like it's just like give me a lot of positive vibes, and my day goes well after that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So we went through the initial part of, things that you can do to create balance within your life. And now I'd like to talk about what is wellness. And Taylor, take it away.
So what is wellness? So the Global Wellness Institute defines wellness as the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyle that leads to a state of holistic health. And so wellness is more than just physical health. And I think that a lot of times we think of wellness as how physically fit we are or how we look, but there's a lot more to it. And health and wellness is kind of on a continuum. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the 7 dimensions of wellness are as follows. So there's occupational wellness. And so that is personal satisfaction and enrichment from your work or your leisure activities, your hobbies. Financial wellness is your satisfaction with your current and future financial situations. Environmental is good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support well-being. So in terms of environment, it's not just talking about nature, although that is very important. It's also talking about the environment that you place yourself in, the people that you are with, your physical environment, so your space. Social wellness is developing a sense of connection, belonging, and a well-developed support system. So a support system is so important. Just as Nicole mentioned earlier, having those friends that you can go to for a laugh and also having people that you can go to for a more serious conversation. Spiritual wellness is expanding a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And as Sophia just shared with us, prayer or other ways of expressing your spirituality can be really fulfilling and really help us develop that part of our wellness. And then intellectual wellness. It doesn't necessarily mean, having a SAT score or whatever. Intellectual wellness is recognizing your creative abilities and finding ways to expand that knowledge and that skill. So say you're really interested in learning the piano, it's kind of gaining those skills and gaining that knowledge, and not in like a technical sense, but in just what kind of fuels your passion and fuels your creativity. And then obviously physical wellness, so expanding knowledge and skills. Yeah, and so this was the kind of continuum that I was talking about earlier. And so oftentimes most people kind of fall somewhere in between the continuum, with 0 being like at a negative health point, you know, not doing well physically, whereas 10 is kind of having this optimal wellness, so being super fulfilled and, you know, the kind of ideal that we all strive for. But most folks fall in between the continuum, and even day to day, your level of wellness can definitely shift and be impacted by a lot of other things going on in your life. And so I'm just wondering if anyone would like to share or even just think about it themselves. Which of the 7 dimensions are your strength? And so, yeah, if you'd like to share or even just think about it. Oh, and we got a poll. Lovely. Yeah, so feel free to just put your response there. Yeah, social wellness is so important, especially in the pandemic right now with everything being through a screen. Okay, and so here are the results. It looks like spiritual and social are the 2 strong ones, and emotional and financial kind of there. And it looks like not many people are strong on the environmental, occupational, or physical wellness, which is totally okay. And hopefully this kind of gave you an idea of maybe where you need to potentially start focusing in order to kind of build that part of your life. And look at that, the poll question. So yeah, which of the 7 dimensions do you need to focus on the most? I'll just give you guys a couple minutes to answer this. Okay, so looking at the results, it looks like 4 people would like to focus on spiritual, 3 on environmental, 1 on social, 1 financial, 3 for physical, and 5 for emotional. So definitely emotional wellness. This is the webinar for you.
Okay, so I would like to talk about seasonal affective disorder, which we call SAD. I would just I want to define what is SAD is. Many people go through short periods of time where they feel sad or not like themselves anymore. So sometimes these mood changes begin, and it just started, and it just started and ended when the seasons change. So those kind of like seasonal like changes. People may start to feel down when the days get shorter in the fall and winter, also called winter. Um, this disorder called winter blue, and begin to feel better in the spring with when there's like more light, more daylight, and longer days after that. Um, so another next slide, please. Um, so what causes the SAD? So scientists do not fully understand what causes SAD. Research indicates that people with SAD may have reduced activity of the brain chemicals, which helps regulate our moods. So other findings suggest that people with SAD um, produce too much um, melatonin, a hormone that is central for maintaining the normal sleep awake cycle, how we sleep and how we wake up in the morning. Overproduction of these hormones can increase sleepiness. Um, so as you can see, there are like signs and symptoms when you're like feeling depressed most of the day, losing interest in activities that you like to do or enjoying, um, expressing experiences changes in like appetite, or you gain some weight, having problem with sleep, feeling sluggish or agitated, and like in your normal day routines, having low energy, feeling hopeless or worthless, um, having difficulty concentrating anything on your like anything that you were enjoying before, having frequent thoughts of death or suicide. um, so there are um, that leads to like poor appetite, then it leads to weight loss, restlessness and agitation, anxiety, episodes of violent behaviors, and most of all, it just like sometimes it's trouble sleeping, which you call insomnia, sorry.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the pandemic. Yay. So listed here are just some of the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. And because physical and social distancing and staying at home orders, loneliness and isolation is significantly increasing. I feel like it's almost kind of like Valentine's Day for single people, where you're constantly just being reminded and reminded, where we can't leave our house and everything is constantly stay at home and protect others, which is super important, but it can have negative implications on mental health, and it can also affect relationships. So there's a disruption in routine, there's increased demands, and more time spent together with family or your partner in the house can definitely potentially cause some strain. And burnout, which is defined as mental or physical exhaustion from prolonged stress, is super valid. It's real, and sometimes a bubble bath on the weekend just doesn't do enough to mitigate the effects of burnout. And also, we're constantly bombarded with information related to the pandemic, which can be very difficult to deal with. And so another thing to consider is pre-pandemic nostalgia. And this is something that I really relate to as well, is just kind of missing the times before the pandemic, missing those social interactions, missing when you can go out without a mask and just seeing people's smiles. And that's something that's completely normal and valid. And especially, when we're kind of in it, not knowing when we're going to get out of it, it's normal to feel like you miss the times beforehand. And then there's also economic implications of COVID, which can affect mental health. And so the stressors of working from home, or experiencing a potential job loss due to the pandemic, it also goes back to kind of the news and all the information that we're overloaded with. But it's very, for me especially, and for a lot of other folks, it's kind of disheartening to hear like small businesses are closing, and hearing about the struggles in the economy, and that can definitely affect our own mental health as well. So another thing that's so important to recognize when discussing pandemic-related mental health is touch. And because of safety and social distancing, physical distancing, we're unable to touch like we used to. And touch is really, really important for us as social beings. It's a strong way of connection, and especially in partners, touching can, or like giving that physical touch can be a love language, and so that's something that they could really respond to. And so losing touch and not knowing when it'll come back can be distressing and hard. And so if this is something that you're experiencing, just know that you're not alone. And though, video calling is definitely a great way to foster connection, it's definitely not the same as interacting with someone in person. And so, how do you stay well when you're physically distancing? So this chart shows some ways that you can take care of yourself. So for example, in the social little bubble there, it's connecting by phone or Zoom with friends, having a, a video chat, as well as doing kind of mental activities. So, do a puzzle, do a crossword, something that kind of takes your eyes off of the screens all the time, and other activities that can help you express your emotions in a healthy way. So dancing was mentioned, just kind of expressing those emotions and not letting them be bottled up is really important for taking care of yourself during the pandemic.
I brought this up earlier in regards to race trauma when we started our presentation, and I wanted to give some opportunity to really talk about this important topic. What is race trauma, and how does that create stress and mental health challenges? We do have a chat coming up on March the 1st. We're hoping that you can also attend with us, where we speak to professionals about this very important topic. But the experience of race trauma can definitely impact the way that not only that we see ourselves, but can create a huge stress upon our day-to-day life. If we're experiencing race trauma that prevents us from being able to access proper education or employment opportunities, or it's creating a strain onto your everyday life, whether you're dealing with those systems such as educational system or the criminal justice system, that experience can be very difficult to manage and can definitely lead to symptoms related to depression and anxiety, just disengagement, or not being motivated. And so many times, we often have never really had an opportunity to talk about how our identity, our race can really influence and impact the way that we experience stress and trauma. And now that people are talking about it, it gives us an opportunity to really reflect on some of the experiences that we have had in our life, and how those experiences can lead to or impact the way that we feel about ourselves. So in a quote here, it says, it will distress or create distress of many traits of a person's life, including their capacity to have relationships, concentrate on school, earn employment, or simply feel safe in the society that we live in. The other day, one of my friends and I were talking about life pre-COVID and post-COVID. And I asked her a question about, how do you feel about working from home? How are you managing? How was that experience for you? And it was interesting how she said her reply to me. She actually said, I don't really mind staying at home because I remember experiencing lots of aggression. So, we say the word microaggressions, which are just engagement that we have with people that impact our identity and impact our race. And they may say blatant statements that are disrespectful, or just even the nature culture. So she talked about her experiences of macroaggressions, and she shared that, now that I'm working from home, I don't actually experience the same type of aggressions that I used to. The stares, or being in a meeting with someone and them just asking me to be a note taker instead of I'm the one chairing the meeting. Being in situations where people make comments about my hair or how I look, or make comments about people who belong to my race. And instead, I don't have to deal with that every day. And then I really had to reflect on that. You shouldn't have to feel that your work or your role, the employment that you're in, or that your experiences within the community because of race has kept you feeling this way. And she shouldn't have to have felt that way. And imagine, how our children may see here at the end of the day when they have a mommy who's been through so much microaggressions throughout the day or macroaggressions throughout the day, how she's going to be when she engages her children. And they need a different mom. They need a mom who's present and not a mom who is struggling with dealing with those effects of those experiences. And so many times we don't talk about those experiences, but they're very important to highlight how it's impactful towards us. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of race trauma is intergenerational trauma. I gave a talk last night about a very important topic within our culture, which is called colorism. And I talked about how colorism, the idea that certain color people who are different shades are better than other people, and that those who were lighter shade had unearned privileges to be able to move around economically. And that experience of colorism isn't something that happened last year. It's something that started in slavery, which occurred in the 1400s. And so that's similar to what intergenerational trauma is about. It's about an experience that while you may not have experienced it directly, it was experienced through your lineage. And that was passed on from generation to generation to generation. And when you think about how you were parented by your parents, they were parented by parents who experienced a certain trauma, and they parented that way. One of the things that I remember growing up is my parents were very stern around other people, and they didn't trust a lot of people. And so we often had to stay to ourselves or kept to ourselves within our, community or within our home for most of the part. And a lot of that was due to their own experiences of, racism that they may have experienced within the community, that they didn't feel comfortable with us, going out to play outside or going to other people's homes. And so those type of messages that you may remember growing up as a child, really consider, what was the root of that experience. And I'll bring up a big one. When I was a little girl, I used to get in trouble a lot for lots of different things. My parents used spanking as a way of discipline. And I know many parents, continue to use spanking, and I'm not here to talk about spanking in a bad way. What I am here is to talk about is that was a parenting strategy that was used in the 1400s, and they used spanking for their children as a way to discipline them so that they can stay quiet, so the master doesn't get upset. The master meaning the white person who had enslaved them. And so those patterns of parenting passed down generations after generations after generations. And it was continued to use without even question or thought. And that's what I'm talking about in regards to intergenerational trauma. And the last piece is, really around the trauma that may experience within your family. And so one of the experiences within my family is that there is lots of unspoken traumas that happened with my grandmother and before then. And that just continued to pass down. And so when other people, my mom experienced trauma or I experienced trauma, we didn't talk about those experiences because we're taught to keep silent. We're taught not to be able to share. To be able to heal and move towards healing takes more than just one thing. It also takes using your voice. And so being able to talk about these experiences, whether it is to a counselor, to your partner, or to someone close, is really, really important. identifying that, the experience that we talked about from, seasonal affective disorder, which many people are struggling with now, as we can't even go to another country to experience the warmth and the vitamin D, to the experience of COVID, to the experience of race trauma, to experience of losing family members from COVID-19 or other illnesses, and we weren't able to be with them because we couldn't go into the hospital. So understanding that those experiences brought us grief, those experiences have impacted us in many different ways. And being able to identify that this is the experience that we had is really important. And the next step is to seek support. So wherever you need to receive support, whether it is, as I shared, directly with a counselor or someone else, seek the support that you need. And the next piece is around the wellness that we talked about before. So creating wellness within your life will help to mitigate some of the grief that you're experiencing over the past few months. So as it says here, grief is not something that just happens once and then we're okay. There is no time limit. Many people that I've talked to have talked about losing their parent, 20, 30 years ago, and they still mourn for their loss. And there is no end date. I think grief is a process. It's something that we need to do by living every day and finding ways to remember the things that we've lost, but also figure out how we're going to move forward and finding ways to ease the intensity of that emotion of grief. So whether easing means spending time with your children and just enjoying being with them, or easing meaning being with yourself and writing all the things that you're grateful for. Using those methods to help yourself would really help towards healing. I think this is a perfect time for us to begin our wellness activity that Taylor has so kindly placed for us. And then we'll do a questions.
Yeah, so this is a self-soothing body scan. So basically, just, we're going to be doing a little bit of a meditation, although, meditation has a lot of connotations to it, but you can breathe, of course. You can keep your eyes open if you'd like. You could also close your eyes if that feels more comfortable. Get yourself into kind of like a comfy position because we're going to be holding this for about 3 minutes. And it might be difficult to hold the position. There's going to be some times where you want to get up to move to be more comfortable. But this is just an exercise to help us observe the discomfort and that urge to move and learn how to conquer those urges towards behavior. So, if you're uncomfortable, it's okay to readjust. But my invitation to you in those situations would be to be aware of the urge to move, observe it, and then readjust your body. So I'm hoping that everyone can give this a fair try. Okay. So sit in a posture that you feel comfortable in. Start by taking a few deep breaths in and out. Just notice your body as you breathe in and out. Notice your posture, the chair that's supporting you, the floor under your feet. On your next breath in and your next breath out, bring all of your attention to your feet. Be aware of any sensations going on in your feet right now, positive, negative, neutral. It doesn't matter. Just become aware of them. And when you shift your attention to your feet, you might notice an urge to move and adjust them. And simply notice that urge without actually moving them. And notice what it feels like, the different sensations that might comprise that urge. And now move your awareness up to your ankles, to your lower legs, your shin and calves. Just become aware of any sensations. They might be small sensations or large sensations. You might feel tingliness or the touch of your pant leg. It could be any sensation. And now allow your awareness to move up to your knees. Maintain your deep breathing. Think about the front of your knees, the sides, the back of your knees. How does it feel? What do you notice? And now bring your awareness up into your upper legs, the quadriceps, your thighs. Just scan this area of your body like an X-ray machine and scan for different sensations. And again, when the temptation to move arises, just move your awareness to wherever you feel it is strongest. Observe the urge, surf the urge, and try not to move the body. Now allow your awareness to move into your hips and your belly. Notice your belly expanding and contracting with each breath. Simply be aware of what it feels like to breathe right now and the sensations associated with breathing in, the stretchiness of the skin, the deflation of the belly. Just observe. Observe those sensations and move your awareness into your chest. Become aware of any sensations in the chest, whether that's simply breathing in and out. Notice your heartbeat. And now shift your awareness into your back. From your lower back to your middle back to your upper back. Just notice and keep breathing. Moving your awareness now to your hands, your fingertips, knuckles and palms. Maybe you feel heat in your hands, or you feel any sensation. Simply be aware. Let your awareness rise all the way up through your wrists, into your forearms, and scan this part of your body like an X-ray machine. Simply up into your upper arms, the biceps, your triceps, your shoulders. What do you feel? The front of your neck, the sides, the back of your neck. And allow your awareness now to rise up into your jaw and chin and slowly expand across the face, so your mouth, the cheeks, the nose, the eye, eyebrows, and forehead. Just recognize the feelings and notice the feelings. Observe any sensation. And now finally, allow your awareness to the top of your head. Just observe, and if you notice an urge, let it pass. And now allow your awareness to expand to your whole body, from the tip of your head all the way down to the tip of your toes. Notice any sensations that are happening right now. What you feel, whether you can feel yourself in the chair, whether you're noticing your hair or, an itch on your body. Just recognize that and breathe out and breathe in and breathe out. And now in a few moments, feel free to open your eyes and bring your attention back into the room. And I can't really see anyone, but I know you all did a great job. I know it's really hard to be focused on your body for so long, and it feels really uncomfortable, and it might even feel foreign to a lot of folks, but I hope that this activity helped you feel a little bit more grounded and present in the moment. And just to see if it did, we're going to be doing a little poll.
I know, that was really good. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right, so our last poll for the night. After this, how are you feeling? And we're done. Thank you everyone for participating. Definitely, it seems like the consensus, 64% said their body feels relaxed. All right.
Ooh, awesome.
We've accomplished our goals for tonight, and no, we got more for you. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what are the grief symptoms that is important to look out for. I believe Taylor, we were going to talk about that.
Yeah, so as we discussed before, grief encompasses a lot of domains of life, so emotional, physical, behavioral, and spiritual. And there's a lot of different reactions to loss that can fit into these domains. And so, without kind of reading the entire list, some of the symptoms of grief and loss include, so for emotional, that numbness, denial, anger, that's kind of like along the stages of grief continuum. Physical symptoms, feeling that shortness of breath, feeling like, like a hit in your chest, like feeling it in a heavy heart almost, and having kind of stomach aches or a headaches, just basically physical symptoms of the grief and the loss occurring in your body. Behavioral, cognitive, for example, forgetfulness, poor concentration, lack of initiative. Social, and this is a really big one, is withdrawal from relationships and routines, as well as loneliness and isolation. So, not knowing, or, potentially having a connection, friends with that person that was lost, and then not knowing how to reach back out to them. And then spiritual. So, a lot of times questioning your faith, asking yourself, why me? Um, like, what did I do for this? Do I deserve this? All these kind of questions go on, and that's completely normal.
And I just like to also mention, we talked a lot about the different domains of wellness. And you notice with grief and loss, some of the symptoms you experience can be within some of these domains. So if you're feeling any of these emotions, such as, from the physical pains, it's telling you that your physical body needs to do some work around the healing, or you haven't been paying much attention into your physical body. If you notice that socially you're withdrawing from relationships, feeling lonely and isolated, that's your body's way of telling you that you need to spend some more time focusing on that area within your body.
Exactly. And so, people can really think about and experience situations very differently. This is kind of like an interpretation, or the automatic thoughts that you have. And so, an interpretation is kind of how you make sense of a situation. And it might be the same or it might be different from the situation itself. And so, for example, if a loved one died of a terminal illness that they've been battling for a long, long time, there might be different reactions that someone can have to the situation. And that in and of itself can affect their mood and their feelings around the situation. So for example, someone thinking, if I'd noticed the symptoms sooner, maybe they would have been able to beat this. They're gonna most likely feel a lot of guilt and shame around that, and feel hurt. If someone said, the doctors didn't try hard enough to help them, they might feel angry and frustrated at the system, which is valid, but it does play a part in how you interpret the situation. So for example, if someone was thinking, at least they're not suffering anymore, that might bring about a sense of relief, and that might be a really comforting emotion for that person to go through. And now kind of looking at like an alternative response to grief. Say you had a situation where, your late partner's pillow didn't smell like them anymore. And this might cause you to think a lot of these thoughts, like, I'll never be okay. Everything reminds me of them. I'm never going to get through this. I can't handle the pain. And even just letting those thoughts down, writing them down, acknowledging them, giving them space to exist. And then kind of, instead of just letting those emotions sit with you, taking action. So maybe calling a friend for support, saying, this is the situation, and I could really use a listening ear right now. Or, write down your feelings and thoughts around that. Write down a special memory that you had with the person to help you feel connected to them. Or spend some time with children or a pet. Kind of this idea of behavioral activation. So kind of getting yourself up and engaging in an activity that can bring you a feeling other than, what you're experiencing with the grief and the loss.
Thank you, Taylor. And I recall just before the pandemic started, I had just lost my cousin quite tragically. And I remember saying to myself, I miss them so much, I can't handle that pain. And so I definitely agree that you do have to figure out how can you seek support or write down your feelings to at least get them out and go through the processes that you need to do to go through grief. So thank you. Our next major topic that we wanted to kind of close with you on is, how then can we take some of these strategies and even this information that we shared? I know it's a wealth of information. How do we then raise healthy families? What are something that we need to keep in mind to support our children? And one of the things that I've shared in the last, workshops that we've held is that it's really important to be honest with your children about what's happened. I think we, come from a background where, tell children the least amount of information, or we find that they're not going to understand or they're not going to be able to make sense of this information. But you'd be surprised what kids know. I think as a child play therapist, one of the things that I have been doing is asking kids, what's your perspective of COVID-19 and what do you think is happening? What is anxiety? And they give me so much information. So it tells me that children are listening, and it tells me that children really want to have information about what's happening. So be okay to tell them, and you can tell them, not maybe the nitty gritty of what's going on, but tell them the information that would be helpful to them. When you have a family that may experience grief, that someone may have passed away, being okay to share that information with them in terms of, this may have happened, but pull in your own spiritual beliefs around what happens to people when they pass away, so that that young person develops a really healthy perspective in terms of when difficult things happen, we figure out a way to heal. Another example is wage trauma. So if you have a child who experiences racism within schools, and we know that that's something that our children do experience in terms of anti-Black racism or aggressions, and other people from many different communities also, experience race-based or faith-based trauma within the schools. So we know that's going to happen. And so to help and support your child is really around just being able to talk to them about that. Talk to them about that experience, ask them how it makes them feel within their thoughts, within their body, within their feelings, what comes up for them when those things happen, and help them to really process those experiences. It's not enough to say, don't worry about it, or, they're just a bully, or making those statements. I think our children really need the opportunity to get some tools on how do they manage these things and these experiences. Another issue or experience, I guess, that has been coming up is that many families have been separating since the beginning of COVID-19. And I think that was, once at the beginning was something that people started to, say, is this going to be an issue for relationships? It actually has been an issue for relationships. And so I'm seeing a lot of children whose parents are newly separated or starting to, divide their families into two. And I think many parents struggle around, how do I share this with the children? And I think being really candid and open is really important. You can bring them in terms of, helping them understand, what the living situation is going to be like, what they need for their new room or their new home, or some things that they're going to treasure or bring back and forth. I mean, there's lots of support that you can do to provide them, but I think giving them as much clear information is really helpful. You don't want to share information with them, about the other partner that's not helpful, that's not supportive of that relationship, because you still want to support the relationship with all members of that child's family, right? But you also want to have candid discussions with them about, how they're going to heal, or what their life is going to look like moving back and forth, and what are some of the challenges that they may experience, and how mommy and daddy or their parents are going to manage that and support them through that. So being really open around that piece. And many young children have been struggling with anxiety. So they're worried, when they wear masks. Many children have talked about feeling like they can't breathe, and that it's difficult for them to wear the mask all day. It's creating sores on the back of their ears. And what I've done is really validate their feeling, because they're absolutely right. It is very hard to breathe in a mask. And by validating kids, it helps them to know that you believe and support them. And they will feel more comfortable to talk to you about other things that may come up. Another challenge, young people had shared, is that sometimes in class, one of their peers may go away for a long time, and they're really afraid of what happened to them. Many of them, their first inclination was to say that that person had COVID and that's why they couldn't come to class. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But many children have come to realize that COVID can also kill people. And so their biggest worry is that their friend is not going to be here anymore. And so as parents, it's important to ask our kids questions. Sorry, I don't know what I just said. It's important to ask your kids questions. So asking your kids questions about, about kids in their class. Has there been a child that's left? Has there been a child that they haven't seen for a couple of days, and helping them to kind of explain and understand that experience for them. And also having a family that builds in some of those rituals and routines that I talked about earlier, build that into your family routine. So whether it's Friday night game nights, and every Friday night you come together and play games, continue that routine for the entire time. Having those routines are really important. Even at, every evening, if every evening you are, doing bath time and doing massages for your children and then reading stories with them, maintaining that routine is really important. And that helps them to know what to expect every single day. Many children are starting school a lot later, especially teenagers. And so, taking that break in the morning and doing kind of what I explained was my routine, doing that with your teen children is another helpful way of kind of bringing them into that routine lifestyle. And it reinforces to them the importance of self-care and routine and wellness. So it's not something that you just keep to yourself, that you also want your children to replicate within their everyday life. And I put this slide up in every single one of my trainings. I think it's really important to know that with every family, there's always going to be conflict. As I shared, many families have decided to separate. But just because families separate, or just because there's fights and arguments in a family, it doesn't mean that love is disappeared and there's no care and support that can still be provided with each other. So when there's situations in a family where there is conflict, where issues come up, get support, and work on resolving the issue. And you can do that intentionally, even with your children present, to teach them that, yes, conflicts can happen, but we can always be able to resolve the issues or the challenges that we have as a person, as people. It's important to reinforce forgiveness within all of your children. For your children to do with their friends, for you to also emulate as parents forgiveness, and also be okay to tell your children whenever you've made a mistake or you did something that you could do better in the future. It's okay to do those things. It doesn't mean that your child doesn't respect you or will stop respecting you. It's really just a way of showing, that it's important to say you're sorry, regardless of how many times that you need to do so. And using, the form of talking as a way to, resolve issues. When we're creating this webinar, one of our facilitators had shared that in Indigenous cultures, they use the circle as a healing way. So whenever there's a conflict within their community or within a family, or someone is struggling, they would develop a circle where people would sit in a circle and they would have a talking stick. And they would begin with, either prayer or meditation or smudging to kind of bring everyone into that present space. And that activity helps to, help people to focus on the matter at hand. and encouraging them to know that we're in a safe space, similar to what we did at the beginning of this webinar as well. And then they would use the talking stick as an opportunity for every person to speak within that circle and to speak their truth from their perspective and what they were working through. And by doing that, you begin to hear people's stories, their experiences, their pain, their humanness that can cause us to do things that we may not even understand the implication until it happens. And so creating opportunities, but even within your family, to use the talking stick, to do a circle, but really focus on resolving conflicts. And I can tell you, when I was growing up, I told you a couple stories, but the other story is that I have three sisters. We have three sisters all together. And my younger sister, who is 5 years younger than me, and another one who is 8 years, and probably have the math wrong. Anyways, as siblings, we fought a lot, and we often use our talking stick as a way to resolve issues. And I know as little kids, fighting is kind of normal and expected. And now I feel that my sisters and I are best of friends. But I think and reflect upon those experiences so critical in being able to teach me further how to resolve issues with my own daughter, with any other relationships that I've experienced. I think Taylor had this next one.
Yeah, so this is kind of just like an example of what you could say to your child if you notice, that they're seemingly having some struggles in school or at home. And just say, I've noticed that you've seemed down lately. I want you to know that I'm here for you, to talk to you or support you in other ways. Let's talk about what's going on if you're open to that, and kind of just using that type of language is really helpful and can hopefully get your child to open up a little bit.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing the questions fill the chat as we begin to, wrap down. So if you have any further questions, feel free to begin to, share with us as well. And any feedback is really helpful. Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, so supporting your child. So what are some ways to support your child? Definitely talk to your child about their feelings and any stressors that they may be experiencing. Listening to your child and reassuring them that you're here for them and that they're not alone in dealing with whatever issues, that you're by their side and able to help them. And having a curious and non-judgmental stance. So as a kid, I was really perceptive to tone. So just kind of making sure that you kind of have like a non-judgmental and a curious tone instead of more like accusatory, and acknowledging and validating their struggles. And so recognizing as well that they might not want to talk to you, and that's okay. Maybe there are other supports that they feel more comfortable talking to, an aunt, an uncle, an older sibling even, or a teacher or someone at school. And recognizing that in order to process emotions, it's important to express those emotions. And so, for example, say your child is experiencing a lot of sadness. So maybe holding a comfort item or listening to music with them or spending some time out in nature and allowing them to express that sadness in a safe space. Or for example, if anger is the primary emotion that the child is feeling, throwing a tennis ball against brick and allowing them to kind of get that anger out in a healthy, in a safe, in a controlled way as well. And for example, with anxiety, draw the anxiety. Think of a goofy or realistic ending to what they're anxious about. And so hopefully at the end of that conversation, they will start laughing and feeling a lot better, or even just engaging in some deep breathing when those anxious thoughts come up can help kind of slow the heart rate down and kind of slow the body, and might be a good way to help support your child when they're experiencing those emotions.
This is a really good slide because when you were saying that sometimes our children respond to tone, I was like, sometimes parents also respond to tone too. So just being really mindful in terms of the battles that you pick with your children, making sure that you're tuning in to how they're feeling, as we're doing today. We're tuning into our mental health. So tune into our children, because sometimes when you see behaviors from them, you automatically assume, disrespect. I mean, that's what my parents assumed right away. And they didn't really take the time to find out more what is happening. And as Taylor is sharing, there's definitely more things happening with our children that we may not be aware of. And the other really key piece that you shared is the importance of being able to talk to someone. Many times parents feel that their children should be only able to talk to them. But unfortunately, sometimes there are times where children really don't want to disappoint you, and they don't want to let you down. And these emotions are huge: sadness, anger, anxiety. There are such huge emotions that our children experience. And they also experience stigma with their own mental health. They experience stigma with even feeling these ways. And they've learned to believe that these feelings are also negative. And so it's going to take them a lot to be able to share how they're feeling with you. And so the most important thing for you as parents to know is, as long as my children are able to share with somebody, it doesn't have to be, myself, but it could be another adult that they trust. And that could be the auntie that you've, elected to be your child's person, or maybe that teacher in school that's really shown an interest in your child. All of those situations are absolutely okay for children. And once they feel, okay, and they get the okay from that trusting adult, they'll tell you how they're feeling. Absolutely. Sorry, did I skip the last one? Are you good for this one? All right. And Taylor, I think, is doing this one.
Yes. So in looking at supporting your child, it's important to recognize the signs that you might, need to seek support or have that conversation with them. And so some of the worrying signs to look out for are a persistent low mood, a lack of interest in maybe the activities that excited them before, decreased energy and decreased motivation. So maybe they're really into school before and they loved this one subject, and then now they're just kind of like meh about it, or feeling kind of those physical reactions to distress. Like a lot of things can be held in the body. So when they're talking about, I have a headache all the time, or my stomach always hurts, recognizing that there might be a mental cause to that. And looking at emotional escapes. So when kids might be feeling those intense emotions and don't know how to cope with them, they might turn to avoidance. So kind of avoiding their problems with numbing or withdrawing. So for example, sleeping in a lot to avoid the day, or spending a lot of time in video games where that they don't have to think and they can kind of go on that autopilot and kind of that numb feeling. And recognizing as well with anger. And so, oh no, my internet, I'm so sorry. So yeah, and then recognizing like that there are some activities might be more helpful for certain moments. So for example, if you feel like your child is like in a place of anger, it might be a good thing to do some soothing activities. So something that's grounding, like the body scan that we did, or yeah, just kind of like listening to soft music or watching a relaxing show. Whereas if they're kind of, in that depressed mood, it might be better to try activating activities. So going for a walk, or going to the park, or, having a 30-second dance party and just trying to engage them in that way to help lift their mood a bit.
That's a great point. I like how you shared those examples, completely consistent with what we shared about wellness. So the same way as you try to develop wellness within your day-to-day life, you also need to do that for your children. So let's do an activity. on a piece of paper or in your phone or in your computer, wherever you wish to do it, draw a circle. Take some time, and I'd like you to take some time to think about, what are some changes that you'd like to add or change to your physical routine? And remember how I shared that physical activity is not just exercising, but it's also, ways to kind of move your body, to kind of express, some of the bent-in trauma or experiences that you may have. And then on another circle, I'd like you to consider your thoughts and your feelings. So how do you usually handle stress? Answer that question. What can you add or help to maintain or manage your emotions? So based on what we talked about today, or even things that you've been considering, what are things that you can add in your day-to-day life to kind of reduce the stress that you may be experiencing? And what kind of supports are you willing to consider within your day-to-day life? And if some of these symptoms that we talked about resonate with you, think of a proactive way to address them. So if you're struggling, for example, with sleeping, what is a proactive way in terms of helping you to sleep better or more quality? And feel free to do those. If you're starting to struggle with even your mental health and seeing that you may be declining, or maybe your symptoms are similar to SAD, what are some of the interventions that you can try to help with managing your emotions? When it comes to your, mental well-being, that's your next circle. Write what you hope to plan to do to kind of enrich your mind, to keep yourself staying positive, but also to manage the times when you don't feel positive. What are the activities will you do to reinforce mindfulness and being aware of yourself within the present moment? And the last circle is spiritual. So that's usually at the top of your page if you've drawn a page. What are some things that you can do in your daily life that can help ground you and connect you with others? What is your purpose? What are things that you like to do to volunteer? What are things that you can do to give back? What are you grateful for? Can you start a gratitude journal similar to what Taylor shared? And whatever you have been able to write down for those domains of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, make a commitment. Develop a plan that incorporates all of your wellness within these areas and work on it every day if you can. And on the days when you can't, on the days when things are difficult or it's too hard for you to do, take the time to be compassionate and show kindness towards yourself, as you would for your children, as you would to your neighbor, as you would to your friend as well. And that takes us to our final presentation. And I wanted to, give an opportunity for each and every one of us to share our recommendations and final thoughts. And again, if you have any further questions, feel free to ask them as well. And we'll start with Sophia.
Hi. As I was just listening to everything, this is amazing. I am a parent myself, and just by learning about little ones and um, learning about everything, the trauma, the grief, the sadness, the everything that is basic, basic concerns of a human being, I feel like I really like the presentation. And
Thank you. And any final recommendations, Taylor?
I think one thing that's super important to remember is not to be so hard on yourself. I think just with the pandemic and everything, there's so many expectations, and there's a lot of things that people think that you should have in your career path or your life path. For example, I'm dealing with a lot of when are you going to get married for my family members? And it's like all these expectations can have a really big toll. So self-compassion is so important, and just knowing your purpose, and knowing that however your journey is, it is valid, it is okay. Whether you are in school and you finish your degree in 4 years, whether it takes you 10 years, like it's okay. And to just be gentle and kind to ourselves.
Thank you, Taylor. I think the whole presentation was my recommendations. So taking time to tune into how you're feeling, as Taylor shared, showing compassion to yourself as much as possible. As I always say this, you need to be your bestest friend all the time. And you would want your bestest friend to be supported when your bestest friend goes through difficult things. I also wanted to share that, yes, we talked about so many heavy things and shared so many difficult experiences, but the beauty of life is that there's still joy and there's still happiness, and to create opportunities to experience joy and feel joy within your family, within the people that you're close to, is really important. And to use those moments to help carry you through sometimes at difficult times can be really helpful. In terms of our questions, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I know we have a question here in the chat that I will read out, and maybe we'll take some turns responding to it. So what are some strategies that someone can use to help a friend or family member that is struggling with grief? And how would you use these strategies to change if they don't want to address their grief?
I think one thing that's really important is just being there for the person and recognizing that, where they are, they might not, be ready to go through the whole, changing and healing process. They might kind of just need that space to sit in their sadness, and that might just be their own journey and their own process through that grief and that loss and those feelings. And so just kind of being there for the person and not having any expectations for their own healing, but also, being that person that can be like, if you're ready, I'm here to talk, and just making space as well, because I know it's really hard sometimes to reach out, especially when you're feeling so many emotions like sadness and shame and anger, frustration. So, if someone is struggling, maybe being that person to reach out to them so that they don't have to go through that extra emotional work.
Thank you. I think as you were sharing, I was thinking about, and I did share that my cousin had passed tragically. And many of our family members really struggled with that. And I think one of them was struggling the most because he kind of witnessed what happened. And so what we did as a family was just reach out. So he would send us messages at 2:00, 3:00 when he started to feel like he was struggling. And we just messaged back and said things like, how are you doing? What can I do to support you? What do you need? And was just there. And I think many times people have had expectations of what grief is supposed to look like and say, well, why aren't they over it yet? Or why don't they just get help? Or the good one is, why don't they just pray to Jesus and it should be over? But we all have our own journey of healing. And so respecting that person's journey of healing, but still being there to support them unconditionally, regardless of what's going on, is very, very important. Another thing that we didn't really touch on, but many people do struggle with addictions, whether it's drug addictions or gambling or other addictions that may happen in our life. And we're so used to the rhetoric around, trying to intervene or trying to stop, that addictive behavior, but not really supporting the person who's struggling with addiction. And it's similar to grief and trauma. It's important to just support them and just to be there for them unconditionally, and placing less restrictions or bias, and being non-judgmental is important, because you want to create spaces when people are ready to heal, because when people are ready to come in, they'll come in, and they would want you to have that door open for them as much as possible. For example, with my cousin, eventually he started to feel better, and he started to feel good about, how the experiences was, and he was able to begin to resolve some of his grief, and he let people in. And by letting people in, he was able to get the support that he needed. But we had to wait until he was ready. We couldn't rush him into that. And that's important for anyone who's struggling with any difficulties, is that they're going to be ready when they're ready. And when they are, let's be there to support them unconditionally. Anything else that you wanted to add or share, Sophia?
As you said, everybody is respond to sadness and a trauma really differently. Sometimes people need more time, and sometimes they're really they just want to get over everything, and that's being a person who is very supportive. Be with them, give them the space, give them more space they need. um, this is the best approach you can do. You cannot just magically take the grief off. It's gonna take time, and that's your job, being that supportive person that can they can trust on, and they can take their all the grief out. So I feel like you should be the person.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And I don't see any other questions, and lots of accolades. So thank you so much for all of the positive feedback. We greatly appreciate it. There is a ending survey as you leave today, so please take the time to complete it. It gives us an opportunity to develop trainings and workshops that is helpful for you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
And just so you know, we will also be posting the webinar within the next couple of hours, unedited, of course. So hopefully you can refer back to anything or share with anyone that you need to share with, and pull from pieces that you would like. And if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out, to contact us at info@kajengafamily.org. And Taylor will write that in the chat before we leave. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for coming all the way from the Philippines. Thank you so much for coming and joining us.